Nomad capitalist Andrew Henderson and I had this interview. Part one came before this. There'll be a link in the description. This is part two, where we talk about flag theory. Flag theory is about dispersing your assets and your interests so that you don't have any one government or institution that has the power over you. We need to take the power back, and it's not as simple as moving from point A to point B. It's a lot more complicated, and we get into that in today's interview. Take a look. You talk a lot about, like on this topic here, we talk about Turkey. Um, Turkey by you can get citizenship by investment,
Yes.
a couple different options. In my business, I work with suppliers in China, so I do like sell on Amazon and Walmart and all that. And I'm working with China, but increasingly Vietnam is becoming more attractive. It's
Yeah.
also becoming more attractive. Number one, Vietnam. I'm becoming more bullish on just because of everything. Basically, they're coming up with more suppliers, although a lot of them are tend to be Chinese, um, at least in my experience. But we also have the geopolitical nature as well as the tourism, right? They have certain advantages there in Vietnam. But if you could talk a little bit about Turkey and anything about Vietnam and maybe BRICS and sort of bring that all together.
Well, first of all, let me just tell you, every time I have a fancy concierge service to help me get to events. And every time I think, all right, like, let me just, I'm a very emerging markets guy. And people think like, oh, he's like a backpacker. He doesn't want, listen, I could afford to live anywhere. Um, and sure, Switzerland's great, but it's kind of needlessly expensive and it's kind of a little boring and it's just, not worth it. I could live anywhere I wanted. I prefer to spend, and I'm planning next year's travels. I prefer to spend most of my time in emerging markets. The people are nicer. You have more what's called soft freedom. You just feel more freedom on an everyday basis. I was in Hanoi, which I think is the nicest big city in Vietnam. I don't. Ho Chi Minh's the business capital, but I didn't find it as interesting. I was in Hanoi. There's a hotel called the Capella Hotel. It's a small chain, most beautiful, most attention to detail hotels I've been in. I think it was probably $700 or $800 a night for like a really nice suite. The most incredible attention to detail, even like to put your glasses up on a little thing. Recently, though, this concierge service sent me to the Montreux Jazz Festival in Montreux on Lake Geneva in Switzerland. And I paid about twice that much for a hotel where things are falling apart and there's cables dangling and the paint doesn't match the other paint because they like plugged in a hole in the wall and now it looks disorderly. And they're not as nice and they don't really do much and they don't really even clean the room until, way too late. Um, and it's like, wait a second. I just want great service, have nice relationships with people, all that kind of stuff. And why is, that so difficult? So I think Vietnam is doing incredibly well. I'm an investor on a smaller level in Vietnam. It's a little bit harder to get into, but there's some funds, again, harder to get into as an American that you can invest in. And yeah, I mean, China has kind of, nobody's going to China for cheap labor anymore. I mean, even Tim Cook will say that. But that's why I think Vietnam does well. Mexico, I said if I were going to give birth to a child, Mexico and the US both grant citizenship based on where you're born. I think 18 years from now, I'd rather be Mexican. Net, right? If I came, obviously I have some resources. I wouldn't give a lot of them to my child, but I would teach them how to be successful. And I think if you factor that into the equation, I'd rather be Mexican. I'd have a lot fewer regulations. Have access to a country that's going the right direction. Sure, the new president may not be everyone, may not be ideal, but if you look at some of those stocks that tanked when she got elected, I mean, they've largely bounced back, like Grupo Mexico. So I just think like places like Vietnam, places like Mexico are heading the right direction. You mentioned Turkey. Yeah, if you buy a house, if you buy an apartment, if you buy real estate, even if you hire a lot of people, you can get citizenship and then you can sell the investment in 3 years and you can keep that passport forever. Not a bad passport for traveling to everywhere but the West.
Exactly.
And I think in the future, that's going to be very valuable. I mean, to travel to Asia, to travel to Central and South America, that Turkish passport's one of the best in the world. And yet they're not bothering you. What does inflation in that country have to do with holding the passport? I mean, I encourage everyone to follow the law. If you live in a country, pay your taxes because you don't have to live in that country. But there are people who don't agree with me who live in countries like Turkey. They live in the country and don't pay their taxes. So the risk that you're going to be a citizen living somewhere far away and they're going to suddenly decide to be like the US, I don't think it would even occur to them, quite frankly. They know they can't do it. But they couldn't do it. I mean, what's Turkey going to do? Like they're going to send people after you when you're living in Asia to like make sure you pay your Turkish taxes? No, you get citizenship. You don't live there. You pop in on layovers because Turkish Airlines is the best airline to connect to everywhere in the world. And yeah, I think those countries are the future. But again, there will be somebody who will be like, oh yeah, like Turkey. Oh, yeah. Well, we just filmed a video called Live Like a King in Istanbul. It's our series. We show luxury living in places you wouldn't expect. And I mean, it's very possible to live a very nice life in Turkey. I'm not saying you should go there and do that full time, but to have a passport like that in your back pocket. I know a guy who became Cambodian because he thinks there's going to be business opportunities there, and it was worth becoming that. I have people who are becoming, South American, citizenships. So, skate to where the puck is going. And the puck is going, to your point, wealth is moving back east. It was moving to the west for a long time, and now it's kind of somewhere, I think, over the Middle East, like kind of the mean of wealth, the median point of wealth in the world is heading back towards East Asia. And I think that what do you hear when you follow geopolitics? It's a lot of countries who say we're tired of getting pushed around, lectured, and getting a bad deal from the US and their allies. And now there's alternatives. Now we can go and hang out in BRICS. We can do a deal with Saudi Arabia. We can buy oil in our own currency. We can go and do a deal with China. I think like 75% of Malaysians prefer to be partnered with China than the US. You can say that's terrible and China's evil. Guess what? You don't get to vote. You don't get to choose. It's not your choice. They're going to go. Thailand's doing the same thing. Most of Asia is going towards China. And the US only has themselves to blame for basically thinking, hey, we got a monopoly on this. We could just come in and throw a few crumbs at them and they'll all bow at our feet. Well, those days are over. And so how is that going to impact your companies and even the S&P 500? Oh, you don't need to buy international stocks. Just buy the S&P 500. Well, as these companies have increasingly, many still have international exposure, no doubt, but like I think as the world in the next 20 years becomes more multipolar, you will see more kind of regional, cliquish kind of stuff. And even you'll see a place like Mexico doing business all over the world, and it will no longer be under the yoke of the US. And you're going to see it flourish as a result. And people can laugh at that all they want, but I strongly believe you'll see that in the next 20 years.
Increasingly, what I'm doing in my business, a physical products business, is getting off of just focusing on the United States and expanding as much as I can, either with partners or doing it on my own in certain cases. But what's happening here is too much focus on one thing, whether we're talking about the US dollar, whether we're talking about US financial system. Like there's way too much focus. And I think that if people are finding themselves sort of stuck, I think that it's going to be more of a problem in the coming years. Like we're not going to start reversing trend and going back into, more growth coming from the West. I think people are mistaken if they do believe that. And, the writing is on the wall, essentially.
I think the big issue is the following, is people have an ego. And they've been told for all these decades it's okay to have an ego. It's the best place. Everyone wants our money. Here's a question we get posed a lot. Well, if it's so bad, why is everyone coming here? Well, first of all, listen, everyone gets to make their own choice. Obviously, 330 million people choose to live in the United States. I made a video once, how to leave with $1,000. Buy a plane ticket and go. Like, I didn't say how to move with all your furniture and 7 bedrooms and 3. I said, here's how to leave. If you don't like it, here's how to leave. Buy a plane ticket. If you make $1,000 a month, you can get residence in certain Latin American countries and you can go. Buy a one-way plane ticket, get your residence permit, you can go. Nobody's stopping you. So 330 million people choose to live there. But every year, thousands of people give up US citizenship. I doubt many of them are immigrants from El Salvador who became naturalized. In fact, I can tell from our clients, immigrants and children of immigrants almost never give up their citizenship. It's a sunk cost fallacy. But I realize, I'm going to Wales soon to track down part of my ancestry. and to go and see where they're from. Welsh coal miners who left for a better life. And I did that, and I built most of my wealth, the vast majority of my wealth at this point outside of the United States, where I'm from. And I think that the ego of everyone's coming here. Listen, I have great empathy for people from places like Central America. I think that there should be a sort of Marshall Plan for that region. I mean, the drug war, which has failed, pushing that not through the Bahamas on planes, but pushing that over land through Central America is part of the reason you have violence in that part of the world. Yeah, you know what? If your town is violent and people are dying every day, you might want to get out too and go to a place that you've been marketed to is the place to be. But the US is very good at marketing. I mean, probably the best marketers in the world are Americans, because it's a country built on marketing. And even since the 1800s, immigrants realized, hey, the marketing doesn't quite match the reality, but hey, we're here. Again, sunk cost fallacy. But if you're basing your country's success on the fact that people are leaving, emerging world, violent, poverty-stricken situations, I'm not moving to the US. I'm not moving to the UK. Every high-tax Western country is losing wealthy people. I'm not saying some aren't coming, but they are leaving. Look at the UK. They're about to lose a bunch of wealthy people with their new policies. And so it just comes back to, for me, I want to define myself as someone who makes an impact, as an entrepreneur, as, whatever. People say I'm a husband, I'm a father, whatever. To me, that's my definition. I don't need to define myself by a nationality. I doubt that you're probably like most other Americans or most other Canadians anyway, especially if you're thinking about this kind of stuff. You're probably already in the minority. Why do we need to define ourselves as that? But when that's all you can define yourself as, that's when it gets really irritating to hear that if you look at the stats, the United States is number one in only one thing, and that is prisoners per capita, not even obesity anymore. And that's not me being angry, but that's me since 12 years old reading the stats and reading the indexes and reading what's happening and agreeing with you that, yeah, I mean, wealth is moving. And you can be angry about that, or you can accept that you're one of 8 billion people and no one cares what you think and no one cares what I think and nobody cares. The world's not going to change because you've got an opinion. And you can say, hey, how do I do this and how do I go along with this within my values?
One of the things that we should make sure to cover here before we end off is flag theory. And for most people, I certainly wasn't told about it growing up, that's for sure. And just trying to explain, I've tried to explain it on my videos before, and just to highlight for people. And I should also say, just because they're not doing that now, they have a 9 to 5, they live in the one place, that they should start to go and do these things, and why, and so on.
Well, yeah, many, many years ago, there was, the 3 flag theory, and then it became the 5 flag theory. And now I think that people just want to be distributed as much as possible. When I first started talking about this in my home with particularly my father back in the mid-90s, in the early days of the internet, if you remember Prodigy, you'd go on Prodigy and you'd say, is anyone thinking of moving to New Zealand? The idea was, hey, we'll sell the house, we'll pack up the truck, and we'll ship everybody over to New Zealand. And then one day we'll become New Zealand citizens, because you don't just get the citizenship when you arrive. People also have that misconception. And kind of like, we'll trade the US for New Zealand. And so, does New Zealand have the best, safest, and most easy to work with banks? Probably not. Is it the best place to invest your money, like in the New Zealand stock market? Probably not. What else? Like, go through the list. My idea is choose the things that are best in each place. And then what is not best in that place, go somewhere else. So, for example, you could say, in my opinion, the most user-friendly banks, they don't have a lot of blah, 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 that are super safe according to all the rankings, allow diversification, they're in Singapore. So you can have your bank account in Singapore. Oh, so you're going to live in Singapore? Oh, but it's so expensive. I didn't say live in Singapore. I said go and open a non-resident bank account and bank in Singapore. You could live, let's just take Malaysia as an example. I called it the global citizen sandwich. You live in the places in the middle, you keep your wealth in the place on the top, and then you invest in the place that's up and coming where there's lots of profit potential. But you don't have to do that. I mean, you could say, I'm going to invest in the S&P 500 in a brokerage account that has a bit more protections, that's in whatever country. I'm going to keep my bank account in Singapore. I'm going to live in Malaysia. I'll pay taxes in Malaysia potentially, even though, their system is if the money's not earned in Malaysia, you generally don't pay, at least for the time being. Like where's the best? Now, I might have a bank account in Malaysia to facilitate payment of local bills. With services like Wise, even that's not always required these days, but my main bank account, brokerage account, investments may be somewhere else. All right. And so the idea is what's best in each place. I look at it in three categories: your finances, your freedom, and your lifestyle. Finances are your taxes. How much do you pay? If you're paying 40 and 50%, you're being robbed. You're not getting your money's worth, especially if you're successful, right? There's no place on earth that I can go and pay $5 million in taxes and think, well, I'm getting a great deal. There's nowhere on earth. So, you can lower your taxes legally. It doesn't have to be to zero. My taxes have gone up, not as a percentage, but just the amount's gone up. You can, choose to protect your assets, diversify your assets. That's the finances. Freedom is where do you feel more free? Yeah, your country's got a constitution. That's cute. So the politicians follow it, or do they trample on it? I don't think you need to tell the wonderful, nice, sweet people in Malaysia just to leave you alone, because they're pretty harmonious. Like they don't maybe they don't have quite as much of like things enshrined in law, but people just chill. They don't screw with you. Like people aren't being shot at. So go for soft freedom. And then lifestyle. Where do you enjoy the lifestyle? And there's many things that could define that, but each place is going to serve a different need. I think Singapore's got a great lifestyle, but is it financially sound to go and pay 60% tax as a foreigner to buy a property to live in? $10 million house, and then you got to pay $6 million in tax. Down the drain. There it goes. When you could live in Malaysia and buy the same house for probably $1 million. Why would you do that? Right? The lifestyle is not that much worse. So it's these combination of things where you're kind of figuring out what's the best opportunity. And the reality is when you get outside of a handful of Western countries, even some Western countries are good at this, they realize they've got to compete for your business. I'm sitting in Ireland. Decades ago, they're like, you know what? People can't get jobs here. Let's join this thing called the European Union. Let's have the lowest tax in that organization. And let's get all the businesses to come here. We've got English speakers, and we'll compete. Because if we don't compete, we're going to get rolled over. But it's the US, the UK, maybe to some extent Australia, and a handful of other countries that are just like, hey, we're the belle of the ball. But they're not the belle. They're like the age. It's like the prom queen, and now she's 45. And she can't let go. And like she gets together with the friend. They still talk like, remember, in 1993 when we had, it's like it's over. And that's hard for these countries to admit. And I think the reason you want a second passport is the more it hits them, right? I mean, you ever see like these Karens at the store when it's like they don't just get to like bat their eyelashes? It's like now they're mad, right? That's going to be what your country's going to be like when it's like when they can't just like bully everyone into doing their bidding. Oh, now they're angry, and now they're going to more rules, more taxes, more like, oh, it's going to be nasty. I really believe that. And so that's why you want to be diversified. I mean, imagine if one country just said, hey, here's our new rule, and all your money was there, or you couldn't leave, or whatever. Well, you're screwed. Follow the law. But I also would say, and no but just follow the law. Also understand, if you don't like the laws, you're legally free to go somewhere and put yourself in a different situation where those laws are better. Because I fundamentally don't believe that, the UAE is like a lesser country because they choose not to tax individual income. They're a country just as much as anyone else is a country, and they've made that choice of how they want to run their country. And if you want to go there, you're welcome to go there. And how dare anyone else say, because they're running their country in a much worse way, that some other country should. That's like, if you're in a relationship where someone beats you, like, yeah, like, oh yeah, that guy who wouldn't beat you, like you talk that guy down, right? Because you want to make sure you can keep manipulating and abusing someone. You don't want them to go to the relationship. It's like, where it's just good. And that's exactly what it is. And those good relationships, in many cases, did not exist 25 or 30 years ago. You wouldn't have moved to Malaysia or Dubai or Panama City 25 years ago, but now you can. And now in many cases, it's better. And that's hard for a lot of countries to adapt to.
Agreed. Yeah, I think a lot of people, I try to teach, building an online business and things so people could start understanding that you can be earning income from different parts of the world. Even if you're going to be staying in that one place, at least learn to sort of understand that there's a whole world out there. So we could talk all day, but I certainly do
You thought we were going
appreciate
to do this in 20 to 30 minutes.
we can go all day if we need to. Um, I really appreciate your time, first of all. I know my subscribers do as well.
Thank you.
Many of them already have been to all of your resources, but if you wouldn't mind just mentioning where people can go to find out more.
I wrote the book called Nomad Capitalist. It's on Amazon. I mean, it's I think over 2,000 great reviews at this point. It's not a how-to guide. It's a collection of stories and real life experiences that I think open people's eyes to like the stuff that maybe they didn't know. One thing I learned when I talk to wealthy people, they're most focused on unknown unknowns. Like that's the thing that I've learned as I become more successful. I'm always like, how do I solve the thing I don't know that I don't know? And so I think that the book is an interesting starting point for that. Obviously, we've got about 2,700 videos on YouTube under Nomad Capitalist. We've got, we deleted some, but probably 1,500 articles on nomadcapitalist.com if you prefer to read. If you're looking to do a bit more of a deep dive, we have an annual event called Nomad Capitalist Live. We sold it out in 14 days this year. We've got, the CEO of AirAsia, Tony Fernandez, is coming, and Nigel Farage, who led Brexit, and all sorts of other CEOs from around the world, and heads of state, and just everyday experts, including my team. So that's an event called Nomad Capitalist Live. You can find that on our website. And we work with clients. Generally, it's $1 million liquid net worth, so it's not for everybody. But we help people do what I think is very important, whether you do it with me or not. It's a holistic plan. Stuff has to work together. How do you leave Canada? How do you get into where you're going? How do you make sure you did all the right things along the way? Flag theory, your company probably shouldn't be where you're moving. So where's the company? How do we make that compliant? How do you everything has to work together. And sometimes there's 5, 10, 12 different elements that all have to work together. I find a lot of lawyers, and again, just talking to the chief knowledge officer, a lot of lawyers don't know their own country's laws. We correct some of these lawyers we talk to far too often in their own country, let alone they don't know how their country's laws work with all the other countries' laws. And so we kind of provide that, that bridge for people who want one-stop shopping to do it. So that's kind of the ultimate. But book, YouTube, website, live event, services is what we do.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you for being here today. And on behalf of everybody, thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.